The first thing the alien queen noticed was the scent, and it stopped her heart for a single impossible moment. The imperial court of Aurelia Prime had been many things over the centuries, grand, terrifying, magnificent, but never silent. Not like this. Hundreds of voices from dozens of star systems had filled the towering chamber moments earlier, echoing beneath the immense vaulted ceiling made of living crystal that glowed softly with blue bioluminescent veins. Diplomats from distant colonies stood in ornate clusters, armored commanders whispered tactical predictions, and elegant nobles with long silver ears and pale luminous skin watched the proceedings from floating terraces that circled the throne. And now every single one of them had fallen quiet. At the center of the chamber stood the reason. A human. Two imperial guards flanked him, their tall frames rigid and graceful, their violet eyes unblinking. Their armor shimmered like liquid metal as it adjusted to their movements, alien technology responding to subtle muscle shifts. Between them, the human looked disappointingly normal. Dust clung to his boots. His jacket looked worn. One sleeve had been clumsily repaired with thread that did not match the fabric. He wasn't particularly tall. He wasn't particularly intimidating. His dark hair was slightly messy, and he had the uncomfortable expression of someone who had just walked into the wrong room at the worst possible time. Which, to be fair, he had. The Imperial Hall of the Aurelian Empire was not a place humans typically visited, especially not in chains. A quiet murmur spread through the nobles watching from above. So this is a human. They look smaller than I expected. I heard their bones break easily. They smell strange. The human shifted slightly and glanced up at the terraces, clearly hearing some of the whispers. Well, he muttered under his breath, good to know my reputation arrived before I did. One of the guards stiffened beside him. You will remain silent before the queen. The human tilted his head slightly. I wasn't talking to the queen. The guard's eyes narrowed. Across the chamber, a tall alien woman standing among the court scholars pressed a glowing tablet against her chest and whispered excitedly to the noble beside her. He is unusually calm, she said. Humans are supposed to display fear responses under this level of threat. The noble sniffed faintly. He may simply be foolish. At the far end of the immense hall, elevated above the court by a wide staircase of translucent crystal, the throne of the Aurelian Empire stood beneath an enormous arch of glowing stone that pulsed faintly with ancient power. Upon that throne sat the ruler of 3,000 star systems, Queen Lyriel Aurelian. Her posture was perfectly still, yet nothing about her presence felt passive. Her long silver hair fell like liquid moonlight across the dark surface of her throne, and faint patterns of light moved beneath the luminous skin of her arms, the subtle mark of her species, bioluminescent biology. Her eyes, narrow and violet, reflected the ambient glow of the chamber. She had not spoken yet, which made the tension worse. The captain of the Imperial Guard stepped forward, his armor emitting a soft, harmonic hum. Your Majesty, he announced. This human was captured near the Carthan border while piloting an unauthorized scout vessel. The craft carries advanced sensor equipment and encrypted navigation logs. A murmur rippled through the chamber again. Spying, humans were not officially enemies of the Aurelian Empire, but they were unpredictable. Their young interstellar civilization had grown fast, far faster than many older species liked, and fast-growing species made nervous neighbors. The captain continued. Our analysts believe the human vessel was mapping Imperial patrol routes. Several nobles hissed quietly. The human raised a finger slightly. In my defense, he said, I map a lot of things, mountains, asteroids, interesting restaurants. Patrol routes just happen to be very geometric. The guard beside him jabbed an elbow into his ribs. The human coughed. Right, silent. The queen still had not moved. Her gaze rested on the human with an unreadable calm. Then something changed, subtle, almost invisible. Her breathing slowed. Her head tilted just slightly. At first no one noticed, but the queen had caught something, a scent. It drifted faintly through the air of the chamber, carried by the slow circulation currents of the palace atmosphere system. It was buried beneath the sterile aromas of polished crystal, charged energy fields, and ceremonial incense used during court assemblies. But it was there, earth, metal, smoke, and something older, something buried deep in memory. The queen's fingers tightened slowly on the arm of her throne. Her mind rejected the thought instantly. Impossible. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she inhaled again, more carefully this time. The scent was faint, but it was real. Down on the chamber floor, the human shifted his weight awkwardly and looked around at the massive alien architecture. "Not gonna lie," he murmured quietly, "this is a pretty impressive room." One of the guards growled softly, "Silence." "Right," the human said again. Above them, the queen slowly rose from her throne. That alone caused a ripple of surprise across the court. Queen Lyriel did not stand during routine prisoner hearings, but now she stepped down from the throne platform, one step, then another. Her long silver robes flowed behind her as she descended the crystal staircase toward the center of the chamber. Every eye followed her. The human noticed the sudden shift in attention and glanced over his shoulder. "Oh," he said quietly, "that's probably not good." The queen stopped halfway down the staircase. She inhaled again. There was no mistake now. That scent. A memory ignited behind her violet eyes like a star returning from darkness. Rain falling through alien trees, blood on pale hands, a dying red sun burning low on the horizon, and a human voice saying something ridiculous while standing between her and death. The queen froze, completely. Across the hall, the captain of the guard noticed immediately. "Your Majesty?" he asked cautiously, but the queen did not answer. Her gaze had locked onto the human, and for the first time since entering the chamber, the human looked slightly uncomfortable. He scratched the back of his neck. "Okay," he said quietly. "Why does it feel like I just remembered something and I don't know what it is yet?" For several long seconds, the most powerful ruler in the Aurelian Empire simply stared at the human, as if the entire court had disappeared. The silence became uncomfortable, then it became alarming. The captain of the Imperial Guard cleared his throat carefully. "Your Majesty." Queen Lyriel did not respond. Her violet eyes remained fixed on the man standing between the guards. The scent lingered in the air, faint but undeniable, brushing against memories she had buried under years of diplomacy, war, and the weight of ruling an empire. The human shifted awkwardly under the attention of hundreds of alien eyes. "Okay," he said quietly to the guard beside him. "I'm not an expert in alien court etiquette, but is the staring part normal?" The guard did not move. Silence. "Right," the human muttered again. High above on the floating terraces, nobles leaned toward one another, whispering. Why is the queen looking at him like that? Does she sense something? Perhaps humans emit pheromones. That seems unlikely. Aurelian scholars nearby were already recording the moment on their floating data spheres, the tiny machines humming softly as they documented every micro-expression on the queen's face. But Lyriel barely noticed the court anymore. Instead, the memory pressed harder against her thoughts. Rain striking the canopy of a forest on a world that did not belong to her empire. Pain spreading through her side where an assassin's blade had pierced her armor. Running. Alone. Then footsteps behind her, heavy human footsteps, a voice. "Hey, you look like you could use some help." The queen blinked. Back in the present, the human tilted his head slightly, studying her with cautious curiosity. Up close, she was even more striking than the rumors suggested. Her skin glowed faintly like moonlight on water, and thin strands of bioluminescent patterns moved beneath the surface like living constellations. He had seen alien royalty before, but something about her expression bothered him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't authority. It looked more like shock. The queen slowly continued down the remaining steps until she stood on the floor of the chamber. Gasps spread through the court. An emperor or queen descending to stand at the same level as a prisoner was unheard of. The captain of the guard stepped forward quickly. "Your Majesty, it may not be wise." She raised a hand slightly. He stopped speaking immediately. Lyriel approached the human slowly, each step measured, graceful, and impossibly quiet on the crystal floor. The guards stiffened as she passed them. Now she stood only a few steps away from him. The human blinked. "Well," he said softly, "this is new." He looked down at the energy restraints around his wrists. "Just to clarify," he added, "if this is the part where I'm dramatically executed, I'd like to point out I had nothing to do with mapping your patrol routes." The captain of the guard frowned. "You admitted that earlier." "Did I?" the human said. "That sounds like something I'd regret." A few younger nobles on the upper terraces exchanged confused looks. One whispered, "Is the human joking?" Another responded, "I believe so." "Why, no idea." The queen stopped directly in front of the prisoner. Up close, the scent was stronger. Earth soil, gunpowder, rain, and beneath it all, the unmistakable memory of that night. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was softer than anyone in the chamber expected. "What is your name, human?" The question alone startled the court. Prisoners were not normally addressed so politely. The human straightened slightly. Daniel Carter. He glanced around the silent hall. Explorer, he added. Occasional pilot, terrible at staying out of restricted zones. The Queen studied his face carefully. Time had changed him slightly. The man standing before her was older than the reckless traveler she remembered, his eyes carrying the calm patience of someone who had spent years navigating dangerous worlds. But it was him. She was certain now. Daniel noticed the intensity of her stare and lifted an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" he asked. The captain of the guard stepped closer again. "Your Majesty, the prisoner's vessel contained encrypted navigation data. We have reason to believe." The Queen spoke without looking at him. "Remove his restraints." The chamber exploded into whispers. The captain froze. "Your Majesty." Several nobles stood abruptly on their terraces. "A human spy cannot be released. This violates imperial security protocols. Your Majesty must reconsider." But Lyriel's gaze never left Daniel. "Remove them," she repeated calmly. The guards hesitated. Then reluctantly one of them tapped the control on Daniel's restraints. The glowing bands around his wrists dissolved into harmless particles. Daniel rubbed his wrists slowly, clearly surprised. "Well," he said, "that's encouraging." Across the chamber, the captain of the guard looked deeply unsettled. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "with respect, the human may be dangerous." Daniel glanced at him. "Statistically speaking," he said, "most humans are." The Queen ignored both of them. Instead, she asked a question that made no sense to anyone in the court. Her voice was quiet, almost cautious. "Tell me, Daniel Carter, have you ever visited a world called Earthra 9? The human blinked. The name clearly caught him off guard. He scratched his head slowly. "Red forests," he said. "Constant rainstorms. 2 moons that never quite line up." A strange stillness passed across the Queen's face. Daniel looked at her again, squinting slightly. "Huh," he murmured. "That's weird." The captain frowned. "What is weird?" Daniel shrugged casually. "The Queen looks exactly like someone I once pulled out of a really bad situation on that planet." The entire imperial court froze. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch across the entire chamber, no one moved. Then the court erupted. Voices rose from the terraces in shocked disbelief, nobles leaning forward with wide violet eyes while scholars frantically activated their recording spheres. Even the imperial guard stiffened, their disciplined composure cracking under the weight of what the human had just said. "He claims he saved the Queen. Impossible. A fabrication. A human would not even recognize Aurelian royalty." The captain of the guard stepped forward sharply, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. "Silence in the presence of the throne." Gradually, the noise faded, though the tension remained thick enough to feel in the air. At the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, rubbing the back of his neck like a man who had just realized he might have said something extremely inconvenient. "Well," he muttered quietly, "that reaction feels worse than I expected." Queen Lyriel had not spoken. Her gaze remained fixed on him, and now there was no trace of uncertainty left in her expression. The memory had fully awakened. Rain-soaked soil beneath alien trees. A broken blade lodged in her armor. Her body barely able to move as enemy hunters closed in through the forest. Then the sound of a human voice complaining loudly about the weather while firing a crude, kinetic rifle at assassins who should have killed him in seconds. Daniel Carter had fought like a creature that simply refused to accept the idea of dying. Not for glory, not for empire, just because someone needed help. Lyriel stepped closer. The court watched in breathless silence. "Tell me," she said softly, "when you were on Earthra 9, who did you believe I was?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. "Honestly." "Yes," he shrugged, "some traveler who got mixed up with the wrong people." A few scholars gasped quietly. The Queen's lips curved very slightly. "And yet you fought 6 armed hunters for me." Daniel tilted his head. "They were closer to 8, actually." The captain of the guard blinked. 8. Daniel nodded. "One fell into that sinkhole before the shooting started. Lucky guy." Several nobles exchanged confused looks. One whispered, "Is the human making jokes about a battle?" Another whispered back, "I believe so." The Queen studied Daniel carefully. "Did you know," she asked quietly, "that those hunters belonged to the Veyer Dominion?" The name sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. The Veyer Dominion was not a small criminal faction. It was one of the Aurelian Empire's oldest enemies. Daniel scratched his chin. I had a feeling they weren't local wildlife. They had orders to kill me, Lyriel said. That statement alone sent a shockwave through the court. The captain's eyes widened slightly. Your Majesty, the Urethra mission was classified. It was, she said calmly. Now every noble in the chamber was staring at the human differently. Daniel blinked slowly. Wait. He pointed a finger toward her. Hold on. You're telling me that traveler I dragged through the forest for 6 hours while getting shot at. His eyes widened. Was the queen of a galactic empire. Lyriel inclined her head slightly. Yes. Daniel stared at her, then he let out a quiet breath. Huh. The silence that followed was almost painful. One noble whispered, that is his reaction. Another whispered back, apparently. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. Well, he said, that explains why those guys were so motivated. The captain of the guard stepped forward again, his expression now far more complicated. Your Majesty, he said carefully, even if the human aided you unknowingly in the past, he still entered Imperial space illegally and gathered strategic data. Daniel raised a finger. In my defense, your border beacons look exactly like interesting astronomical anomalies. They are defense satellites, the captain replied coldly. See, Daniel said, easy mistake. Several younger nobles struggled not to laugh. Lyriel turned slowly to face the court. Her voice, when she spoke again, carried the quiet authority of someone used to commanding star systems. Years ago, she said, on a world far beyond our borders, I was dying. The chamber fell completely silent. No Imperial fleet was near. No guards remained alive. No allies came. Her gaze returned briefly to Daniel. Only a human traveler who did not know my name and did not care. Daniel shifted slightly. It seemed like the decent thing to do, he said, Lyriel continued. He carried me through a storm for 6 hours. He fought assassins with weapons that should not have been able to harm them. He treated my wounds with crude medical supplies. And when my rescue team finally arrived, her voice softened almost imperceptibly. He was already gone. The nobles listened in stunned silence. The queen raised her chin slightly. This human did not save an unknown traveler. He saved the future of the Aurelian Empire. The weight of that statement echoed across the chamber. Even the captain of the guard did not argue. Daniel looked mildly uncomfortable. You're making it sound a lot more heroic than it felt at the time. Lyriel looked at him. Why did you leave before my guards arrived? Daniel shrugged. I figured whoever you were, your friends probably wouldn't appreciate finding some random human hovering over you. That was wise, the captain admitted reluctantly. Daniel grinned slightly. See, good instincts. Lyriel turned back to the court. By the laws of our empire, she said calmly, a life debt must be honored. Several nobles stiffened. Your Majesty. She raised her hand. This human will not be imprisoned. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. He will not be studied. More whispers followed. He will not be punished for crossing our borders. The captain took a slow breath. Then what will happen to him, Your Majesty? Lyriel looked at Daniel Carter. For the first time since entering the court, he looked genuinely uncertain. The queen's voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. Daniel Carter, human explorer, you once protected my life when no one else could. She stepped forward, and now the Aurelian Empire will return that protection. Gasps echoed from the terraces. I name you an imperial envoy of Aurelia. Daniel blinked. I'm sorry. You're naming me what? An envoy, she repeated. A human representative under my personal authority. The scholar's data spheres began humming wildly. Nobles whispered in disbelief. A human inside imperial politics. Daniel looked around at the massive alien court, the floating terraces, the glowing crystal architecture, and hundreds of stunned violet eyes. Then he looked back at the queen. Just to confirm, he said carefully, I came here as a prisoner. Yes, and now I'm some kind of diplomat. Yes, Daniel let out a slow breath. I should really stop wandering into restricted space. For the first time since entering the hall, the queen allowed herself to laugh. And across the imperial court, the alien nobles who had once looked down at the small, ordinary human now stared at him with something very different. Respect.